I have a few new things to show in this video. All of the Lionel engines that were at my father's house are very old and in need of work. Because of that, I don't want to be running them long and hard. All three also need a visit to a repair center to be made right. In addition, I needed to find a few things to get the rest of the 1960s era train back into good condition. In my other videos, I showed some of the problems with the couple of the train cars. This flat car had one of the couplers broken off years ago. This caboose had the plastic melt and deform from an improperly executed attempt to make it into a lighted car. Engine 8040 had no train cars to go with it at all, which meant it had to share Engine 1061's 10 Duran cars. So I decided to poke around and see if I could get some newer engines to play with, save the vintage engines for occasional use, replace the melted caboose and damaged flat car. Finding a tender for Engine 8040 was also on the list. I found all of what I wanted on the trainz.com website, but because of how they bundle items, I had to purchase a few packages to get everything I needed. The first thing to find was a replacement caboose. This one is almost identical to the melted one, except it has white Lionel markings where the old one had no markings at all, and this one isn't melted. Getting the new caboose meant that I could dismantle the damaged one and use its wheel and coupler assembly to replace the broken part on this blue flat car, making it whole again. These 5 cars were sold in a bundled package, but had what I was looking for with not one, but 2 tenders and a blue flat car that is an almost exact duplicate of the one I have. The tenders are more like the type that would have been sold with 8040 originally, and the flat car is just a brighter shade of blue than the one that I have. The 2 silver tank cars were probably pretty high-end at the time with all-metal frames, wheel assemblies, and 4th rail power-actuated couplers. I saw this bundle and opted to buy it despite the fact that one of the ore carrier cars is badly damaged, and I really didn't need yet another caboose. Getting the caboose, another silver tank car, and 1 usable ore car means I have another complete train. As an unexpected bonus, when the package arrived, I discovered that this caboose was actually made at the factory as a light-up car. This ore carrier car is really messed up. I can't tell if it's a chemical melting from glue or a heat-based melting, but the plastic body is ruined. It has the same kind of wheel assemblies and power couplers as the silver tank cars. I will keep it in case I find a car body in need of a frame somewhere. In the meantime, it can still serve a useful function. The frame, wheels, and couplers are good, and it runs on the tracks just fine. It works well to carry this micro video camera, so for now it will be used as a camera car. What I wanted most from that bundle is this yellow shell tank car. It will work with the 1938 model train. It is unusual to see an all-metal car with the old-fashioned couplers for sale at a reasonable price anywhere, so the whole bundle was worth it to get this one car. It is not exactly the same as the other car on the 1930s train. You can see it is a little bit taller and shorter than the other cars. I don't know if that was just a manufacturing variance or it may just be newer. I don't think they did any reissues of the old style cars. The car is in amazingly good condition for its age, no rust and surprisingly little indication of wear. However, all of that still didn't provide any newer engines to use, and Model 8040 and 1061 are currently at the repair center, leaving me with a newly repaired vintage train and nothing to pull it with. New O-scale Lionel engines are painfully expensive. A company called Ready Made Trains sells these little switcher engines very reasonably priced. They have a bunch of different railroad identities to choose from, and I was very surprised to see Raritan River as one of their choices. That seemed to fit in well with the vintage items from my father, because my grandmother's house where he grew up was around the block from Raritan River's offices, and the railroad was a major part of the town he grew up in. Raritan River was absorbed into Conrail in the early 1980s, so I have little memory of its existence, but it was a significant part of the community and environment for my father. I actually bought this unit from trainz.com because it was out of stock from the manufacturer, but Trainz had one available. This little engine is pretty nice for a low-cost item. It is well detailed, color correct, carrying proper logos and lettering. It has working headlights on both ends, a forward, neutral, reverse direction control system, dual electric motors, one on each axle, and connection cables so you can daisy chain multiple units if you have them. When it changes direction, the active headlight switches from end to end as well. The direction control can be enabled or disabled with a switch on the underside of the unit. Unlike the classic Lionel engines, everything is handled electronically. It also runs considerably slower than the classic Lionels. This allows for a nice smooth moving slow train. The only drawback is that because of how it's designed, the center rail pickup is not directly between the wheels. Instead, it is slightly behind the axles to make room for the drive assembly on the axle itself. As a result, I had to slightly deform the center rail on my switch track turnouts to enable this engine to negotiate them. Doing so had no effect on their operation or use with the other engines, but without doing that, this little switcher would never make it through the turnouts without losing power. This engine is nice and quiet, a little hum from the motors, but most of the noise is made by the cars running on the track, not the engine itself. While I was looking for affordable engines, I saw this whole train advertised for sale on the Craigslist online classifieds. It was sold originally as Lionel's Thunder Freight set. The Craigslist seller did not have the complete set, just the train itself. The cars are very basic plastic cars, but look okay and run very, very smoothly. The engine, tender, and caboose are all in Union Pacific's older gray and yellow color scheme. The train had some damage. The yellow gravel car had one of the wheel assemblies broken off. The yellow plastic body broke away where the rivet passed through. The wheels and axles of the detached assembly were missing. I used the broken wheel assembly off of the blue flat car for parts to replace the ones missing from this car. Since the brake in the plastic body was clean and straight, superglue worked well to put it back together. This 8102 engine is really nice. It was made in the 1980s and is heavy die-cast metal with a motor assembly almost identical to the one in Model 8040. It has a forward and reverse direction control but no neutral, lots of pulling power, working headlight, and a puffing smoke generator. Because of the incline where my tracks transition between standard O and O27 gauge, this engine has to slow down quite a bit to successfully make the transition. The tender has an electronic circuit board and speaker inside that Lionel calls their sound of steam device. It is a white noise generator triggered by the engine, so that it makes an intermittent hissing sound that is supposed to be like that of a steam engine chugging. Because the actuator switch is linked to one of the connecting rods on the engine, it speeds up and slows down with the engine. The circuit board inside the tender had the wire that connects it to the engine yanked off, so I had to resolder a new one in place. This engine is pretty loud, especially running at speed with the sound device operating. With 5 or 6 cars following along, it gets loud enough to consider using earplugs, especially if it will be running for an extended period of time. The silver tank cars and ore carrier are fairly heavy because of their all-metal bottom half. The all-plastic cars are very light in comparison. Both the 8102 and switcher engine are strong enough to pull the entire collection of modern-style cars at once. However, I don't have a large enough track plan to make that practical. It looks like a snake chasing its own tail. Splitting them up into 2 trains works better, and this configuration allows the trains to use the inner parking loop. That is all I have to show right now. When I get everything back from the repair center, I will make a video with the various engines set up on different configurations of cars.